we mentioned prior to the commercial break, we are now joined by Dr. Consuela Waight, and she is the Associate Professor for Human Resource Development at the University of Houston, and she's also a Fulbright Scholar. Good morning, Dr. Waight.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Now, of course, we want to start to learn a little bit more about you. You are a Belizean. You're a professor in the United States, currently here as a Fulbright Scholar. Tell us a little bit about your background. You were raised in Belize.
Correct.
And eventually moved into your professional life in the States, right?
So I actually went to the University of Belize. At that time, it was called University College of Belize.
UCB, yeah.
And I worked for Peace Corps here in Belize for about 3 years. And I actually got the same ticket that I'm here with this time around. I got a Fulbright to go to the University of Illinois, where I did my master's and my PhD in human resource development. I think 20 years later, I'm back on the same ticket as a Fulbright Scholar to work with the University of Belize, primarily. Emphasis is on their e-learning initiative that they're starting at this point in time.
Now, in terms of where the interest started in being able to come back and work along with your alma mater in developing what is essentially the new way of learning, how did that get started?
In conversations with the Faculty of Management and Social Science, e-learning is one of the courses that I teach at the University of Houston, in addition to instructional design, in addition to managing change in organizations. And so consequently, in communication, which to a large extent in Belize, is in talking with people that we learn a lot of what's occurring.
Yeah.
And that's how the initiative started.
What is the importance of e-learning in the context of the traditional way of teaching in Belize, where students enter the classroom, they sit, they listen to the lecturer, take notes, etc., versus this advent and a new wave of learning online?
So the emphasis there is to learning, which is been one of my big emphasis here, is that in essence it's not forgetting someone in cyberspace. The emphasis is learning, and if we look at what learning means changing, helping someone transform, change, regardless whatever that context may be. I think the advent has to do with technology. It has to do with access. It has to do with equity. Human resource development at the national level looks at the private sector, but it also looks at other sectors: Ministry of Health, Human Development, Ministry of Education, education from primary school, tertiary education. And one of the big issues we have in Belize is equity and access, and most powerful is quality. And so e-learning provides an avenue for students who live far away, that are unable to come in to brick and mortar campuses for classes.
Yes.
In no way does it become what the classroom experience is, and that is another big distinction that we have to make, in that e-learning enhances or can help, but it does not, will never ever take over what the classroom experience
I'm so
provides.
glad you mentioned that, because I want to get into what you have been teaching or working with lecturers here in Belize about. But before that, there has been a rollout for some time for some e-learning programs from the universities in Belize, and rightly so, in terms of being able to offer a teacher in Halacte, in Toledo, access to getting their qualifications. There is still some debate as to whether or not the methodology is one that works for all. And where, yes, Belizeans would love to have the opportunity to study at a convenient schedule and still maintain a full-time job and be a parent and whatever else they're doing. Is it, how do you answer that question? Is it the better methodology? Is it the way that education institutions will now function?
That's a very good question, and there's many forces that help to frame that, and there's not one answer in regards to what's the better methodology. I think the number one individual that we need to think about is the student and their employability. So think about what jobs are you then through your programs leaning towards, or what are you preparing your students for? That's the first criteria that we have to look at. The second is the content. not all content can be taught via e-learning. And so if we look at employability, then we cannot depend on knowledge only. We need to look at the creation, the skills, the affective side of the individual, that emotional aspect, because as employees, it takes all of that to do a job effectively. And so e-learning in that case would not facilitate all of that development. But e-learning could play a role in fundamentals, and then the classroom experience could then enhance what has occurred in the e-space. And develop that individual into that well-rounded person.
So what you're saying is a mixed modality is really the better way to go.
Yes, and that has been my push at the University of Belize, that we're unprepared as a country because culturally we're relationship-based. So consequently, interactions are very important to us. The face-to-face is very critical. And so in essence, it will potentially be a blended hybrid model that we will have to undertake to create that well-rounded individual.
I think there's an overall impression that the idea of e-learning at some point will replace the student having to sit in a classroom setting and actually listen and take notes as the traditional way of teaching.
Right, and I think that's a myth. E-learning cannot facilitate all the learning needs that we have. Specifically, again, I like to put an emphasis on employability. Because in essence, we are in a knowledge economy. Globally, we're in a knowledge economy. Knowledge economy means that we're continuously learning, and we're continuously creating and innovating, and consequently, the skill, the affective, the emotions, the soft skills are critical, and e-learning cannot facilitate.
I definitely hear, and I was going to speak about soft skills. When you speak about employability, it's beyond just having the theory, which many can do through books, through e-learning. But it is the little extra that makes you more of a well-rounded candidate to be able to receive a job. Now, I want to talk about how you have formatted your workshops in Belize. You said your focus is on employability. And while you are working with lecturers or those who will develop the e-learning tools, it is once again taking it back to what the student experience will be.
And I actually changed the word student to customer, because in essence the government subsidizes, but they're still paying, and we have a lot of responsibility and accountability to who and what they can do, who they become as leaders, as employees, and what they can do when they leave. The universities. So that's a critical piece. So reframing that. The fact is that they're customers. If you're digital or smart, you have expectations of what service you get. And likewise, students should also have expectations of what their experience and what they're prepared for. I think that's a critical piece to employability. But in designing the workshops, the first thing I ask is, let's talk about the business case for your course. What does that mean? How does your course link to jobs? If you're teaching math, or if you're teaching business communication, then where does that fit in the workplace? How does that look in the workplace? And once you understand that, and then what jobs require those skill sets?
This is fascinating because I hear we talk so often about the shift that is necessary within our education sector, where we will provide skills to people, to our students essentially, that will be usable within the workforce. So if I were a professor or a lecturer of, I can understand psychology and so philosophy.
Yes, actually we did have somebody design for
What is the business case for that in terms of employability within Belize?
That's a good question. So, philosophy is becoming more aware of who you are and understanding, the philosophies that surround us. And philosophy is an important topic given the social issues that we're dealing with in Belize. LGBT, violence, all of those have a philosophical perspective. And in some cases, they're not written, but they're communicated through actions. So in regards to philosophy, the underlying, fabric of who we are as a country, as a people, lends itself into the workplace. And so that is critical, and we can find a connection with the business case. So we want people to go into the workplace that have the interpersonal skills, that value diversity.
It's
When
not
you-
making particular subjects obsolete. It's simply giving them a shifted perspective as to how it will be linked and used within everyday life.
Right. Or in some cases, some of the courses need to be reframed. The content needs to be reviewed because, in essence, if you're teaching chapters, then you have taught based on an author's perspective of a specific content. But are all the chapters relevant to employability as it relates to the context of Belize? Usually the answer is no. So in going back then and assessing, what is in addition to the business cases, understanding the stakeholders. We cannot talk to all the stakeholders, but if we could talk to one or two to enlighten us, inform us as to how our content looks within the actual workplace, then we can draw examples, cases, stories. We may be able to create learning partnerships with those organizations so that our students then learn within the context of work versus context of topics and concepts and theories. Those are critical, but the big question for us is, so what?
Especially as a developing
If they know
country,
this, then what does that do for them? It doesn't do much because in essence we may forget if it's not put within their frame of doing, applying.
So a cursory evaluation of some of these workshops that you've done in terms of the openness for participants to learn and adopt this new way of thinking towards e-learning. What would that be?
In regards to my participants' openness?
Yeah.
Well, in essence, I always take, going back to enhancing the whole individual is the most powerful place for change is you, the individual, and your own context.
Yeah.
So a lot of the concepts that we teach are relevant to our homes. So if I take it to the home, you as the parent, you as a teacher in your home, how does that look? Going back to the philosophy, how do you facilitate learning at home? How do you value learning at home? If I can go to that place and then think about the future of your child in the next couple of years as an employee, what dreams do you have? What vision do you have? And if you have that, then how can we regress that and bring it right to your present context to think about the people you have in the classroom and that they are also searching for the next opportunity in their lives, in their careers. How can you help them get there?
So looking first at the business case, which is so important, and I think will help students to be better prepared for the workplace. What about student assessments? I mean, we don't have that within our primary school systems, and I think now with some of the training the teachers have, they perhaps understand the difference between a visual learner and auditory learner. But those who are at tertiary level at this point in time, they don't even know how they learn as yet. There's always a question as to whether or not e-learning is for everyone. Have you spoken, or is that integrated within the workshop itself as to the instructors having their own assessments and then working along with what the results are?
So the business case was one of the first analyses that we did. We call it the front-end analysis. After the business case, then look at their stakeholders. Then the next analysis was the learner analysis. So understanding who your learners are. Learners, as us as individuals, there's a lot to us. Sometimes we come to work and we have things have happened that impact us. So there's a lot occurring in the context of that learner. So understanding the learner beyond the academics, so that then you can better support that individual in the classroom. One core characteristic is, who are they as adult learners? When it comes to learning styles, the approach that I take is, regardless of your preferred style, because it changes over time with experiences, regardless of your preferred style, you need to be well-rounded. So yes, we will need to talk about what you know about what we're going to, and my philosophy is that we always know something. The limitation exists if the individual can actually awaken it or allow us to think about it in different ways that it makes sense. So thinking about what you know, what experiences have you had, awaken those, validate those, and then we go into the actual new content. So you're making connections, but then you have to practice. So you have to practice, and then you also then need to take that what you just learned and make it your own, because if it still belongs to me, the instructor, then we haven't made progress. You would have had to own that content and make it work for whatever context you're in. And that is the learning styles in essence, where you have the reflective learner, the abstract conceptualized learner, the active experimenter, the concrete experience individual. But in essence, we all need all of those
Now, when you have
to
a
do well in the
classroom-
workplace.
When you have a
Yeah.
classroom setting with these diverse learners, if I may, and with or in the absence of an instructor in the classroom, or in this case in the e-space,
Right.
how does one cater to the specific learning styles of each of these individuals?
And that's exactly what the workshop was about. So once we understand the performance issues, contextualizing the context is then how do we engage that learner? So I look at e-learning like a movie. If you're in a movie, what engages you about the movie? How does it arouse emotions? The e-learning course cannot just be about content. You have had to bring in stories, case studies, pictures, interviews, videos. There's a lot of different ways in how you can facilitate the variety of experiences, of learning styles in that course.
So there's an emphasis on interaction,
Yeah.
visually.
And that's where the software comes in, because a core part of the workshop was learning the authoring tool, the software that is used to develop e-learning. We use Storyline 2, and Storyline 2 allows for a lot of learner content interaction, where it's not just the professor or the lecturer narrating, but in essence, the individual can then use the mouse and actually click or mouse, do a drop down. There is a variety of ways in how that learner gets more content by interacting with the content.
Yeah.
So it is the software that allows that learner content.
It's
interaction.
almost, sorry,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. It's almost like you're likening it to the web surfing experience in a sense.
Yeah.
Like if I go on Google or Internet Explorer and I go to a website, it's already interactive in the sense that there are videos, there's images, there's text, and I just read and I move around accordingly, and that is the way that I would be able to absorb or take in the content being presented.
Right. The other piece that we can do within the e-space is depending on who our learners are. If they already know some content, then we can actually give them the control to choose not to do that part of the content and go into us and that the next level. So that's the other piece that e-learning does. It's at your pace. You get a locus of control. So
I like what you're speaking about in terms of looking at all that is integrated within the class itself. And I think what it does is really reshape the concept that people have as to what the e-learning experience is.
100%.
There are many misconceptions that people have. One, as I mentioned before, that it's not for everybody.
Right.
If you can't sit and watch a video for 40 minutes, then you're doomed. You'll never pass that class. Let's talk about what it actually entails to undertake a course through e-learning and what tends to be some of the common misconceptions that people have.
One, that it's going to be easy. It's not easy. It actually requires more time to teach an e-learning course than it does to teach a face-to-face course.
Okay.
So if you have a 3-hour and you have 20 students, approximately 9 hours per week. Again, because your emphasis is learning.
Yeah.
So your individual learners may have questions. So in the classroom, you can address a question and everybody listens. In the e-space, you may be speaking to 10 students, different questions throughout the day. So that is a big issue. The other piece is response time. The e-space requires that that you're able to respond to your students' gaps, to their questions immediately, because in essence, they depend on that to move to the next level, to be able to make more connections with what they're learning. From a design perspective, it's not easy. It's about 3 months, I think, usually to develop a 12-unit course. So it takes a lot of time, a lot of planning. We have to storyboard, just as if you're doing a movie. Scripts have to be written, storyboarding, you have to think about context, you have to think about how you're engaging that learner. And so all of that takes a lot of time. So time, resources, and the most important thing is what you as the instructor, your value is. You're not going to drop people in cyberspace and think that you're doing e-learning, because you're not.
Yeah.
But I think the other element of that is accountability from the learners. Having expectations of their experiences, I think, would help to tighten that.
Which is why you pointed out using it more as a customer experience versus as a student-teacher interaction.
Reframing that, yes.
Now, having the knowledge that you have, and obviously the practice that you've had within your own university, let's talk about what you met here in Belize in initiating the workshops and the trainings that took place. And as you pointed out, it was about the teaching aspect, but it was also about the design and development.
Correct.
How far were we in that process? And what is the expectation now that you've concluded the trainings and workshops?
So the University of Belize is at the beginning stages of their e-learning, and I'm glad that I was part of that beginning stage, because we've set the tone for a lot of things, and that e-learning at the institution level is not just the course. So you also have the organization requirements, the leadership support, financial support. It is an ongoing initiative. It does not end, because you're continuously looking at improving, updating, understanding that e-learning is not technology. Technology is part of it, but that's not the king. The king is actually the learning that will occur within that space. So coming in from my experience and understanding, we've done e-learning for a couple years now at the University of Houston, and it's that continuous support, resources from the teaching assistants to grants to help to develop courses, and the time that it takes for that. So framing that and looking at the technology itself, we're parallel. So I introduced the same technology that I use in the United States with my students for e-learning design. So there's no reason why we should go subpar in Belize when we're starting out. Let's do it at that level. And the participants have done an amazing job in learning the software. They produced their first module. And so there's strengths among the group, which then creates a community of practice where they can continuously, share knowledge, further develop their skills.
And what have been some of the recognized challenges that are yet to overcome?
So the recognized challenges is understanding what it is. I think it's not a PowerPoint presentation. It's not uploading your course online. There's the accountability for learning, the responsibility for learning. I think that is the one aspect of it. Understanding who the customers are, where they are, what technology, resources they have to be able to engage with the e-space, with the e-course effectively. So we looked at level 1 e-learning courses versus a level 3, because then we don't have the bandwidth, somewhere in San Antonio.
So the technology access is one.
Right.
You're using the software that you use in your school, but the access and
access from our customers in the villages, will they be able to download a high-level e-learning course? And so we have to think about how we marry those two. So we cannot forget who they are and what resources they have on their end.
Any challenges unique to Belizean culture?
I think that there's two issues here. One, as a people, as I shared, we're relationship oriented. So we like our communication, we like our jokes, we like to talk to each other.
There are people who like going into the bank instead of online banking.
Exactly, right, exactly. So we have that need to communicate. And so how do we bring a little bit of that in the e-space? Personalizing it by calling your name, and while you're sitting, Marlene, what do you think? I may not be there to answer, but I've triggered a reaction from you and a smile on your face that I've thought about you. So from that, within that context, I think it helps the learner. So the other challenge is I'm losing my thought.
We were talking about challenges.
The generation. It's not a challenge, but it's an opportunity. Our next generation of learners are already technology adept. So they're, embracing e-learning is not going to be as difficult as perhaps our generation.
And that was going to be my question. I know we're running out of time quickly, but there is all this talk about the generation gaps that now exist, and attention spans. In other words, how long will somebody tune into something before they move on to the next? And we know the younger generation, a 2-year-old can manipulate an iPad better than sometimes a 40 or 50-year-old at this point in time. So when you're creating a program, understanding that maybe within the next 4 or 5 years, the level of knowledge of technology and use of technology will be different from those who are using it today.
Correct.
How do you take that into consideration?
So first of all, the attention span is an important piece, cognitive overload. So we have to think about it's 10-minute units, not necessarily,
Yeah.
you know,
A full
an
hour.
hour of lecture online. That isn't effective. So you know, but the beauty about the software is that you can load up to 10 slides, and then you only have 5 slides that the students interact with, because what they're doing is then needing to interact with the software to be to open the other slides. And it's
So
not
it's like our games. You're progressing as you go along.
good point. It's a game, and it's not necessarily a page of sentences.
Yeah.
So it's chunks of information, but presented in a meaningful way that makes sense. So I think from that perspective, we can help with the attention span. But the most powerful thing is that they see themselves in the design. That they can see then how their learning relates to the work
Yeah.
that exists around them.
That's
So,
part of the personalization process.
exactly, totally.
So did you work with all UB lecturers?
No, so I did for a mix of lecturers from mathematics and education primarily in Belmopan, and then here in Belize it is the Faculty of Management and
Okay.
Social Science.
So I'd assume those are the only areas that are looking into going into online courses.
So we're looking at change agents at this
Yeah.
at this point in time. I think eventually all
Yeah.
faculties doing some form of hybrid learning, but it is the first step. So a lot to come.
Now, Dr. Wade, I want to take this all back to the opening point that you made, which for you, your fundamental value in being able to share this information is simply to increase the employability of students coming out of the university. Do you feel that you have been able to reach that target? And do you feel that those who participated in the workshop have made that connection?
Yes, I think they were required to go out and talk to stakeholders and to look at the business case of the courses that they're designing online. And I can tell you, in reviewing their first module, a smile came across my face because I saw change. And I think from what I've heard, a lot of people have been taught, and I think that's why we're doing this. The next workshop is to exactly attack that issue of employability. And you know, how then do you think about your content? The world does not need someone that has taken a course that has 12 chapters. we don't have any relevance for that anymore. We need people that can that have core competencies, that understand their concepts but can talk about them within specific issues and can see the transferability of what they're learning across, if it's their home or the workplace. We need that critical thinking person.
Ability to apply what
Right.
you've learned.
Exactly. We don't need rote. We don't need I know. We know I can do, and I can do more than what you showed me. Look.
Yeah.
So
we can quote Freud theories, but we need to apply them into everyday Belizean life.
totally, because it's not just about the workplace.
Yeah.
The home itself is an organization,
Yeah.
and so how you go in and talk about financial literacy at home. How do you think about financial literacy at home? It prepares you even more so for how you're going to maximize resources at work. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of undercurrents that are across all institutions, whether it's the home or the workplace.
And your final workshop takes place this week, you said? You're in Belize City?
The 16th. Yes.
Okay. And you'll be working with the Faculty of Management.
Management and Social Science, and we're primarily focusing on what you just shared. Employability, the adult learner within that context. How do we frame our
Now-
content?
In closing, after you've concluded the workshops and you return back to your university, as a Fulbright scholar and having undertaken all this work, how much interaction will you have with the school in helping them keep the track that's already started?
Right, and that's the cool part about this Fulbright is that I'm not new to Belize, that I have a connection with Belize. I'm extremely grateful for what Belize gave me in my formative years of education. An amazing experience, seamless transition to the University of Illinois. I had Dr. Colville Young, for example, as one of my instructors when I was at the UCB at that point in time. Peace Corps, who gave me a lot in regards to experiences around the world. But in regards to coming back, we're already talking about service learning. So bringing my e-learning students in to help, not create, but to help the instructors in their creation of their online courses.
Fantastic. All right. Anything else you'd like to share with us before you leave?
I would just like to say thank you to both of you for having me here. It's been a wonderful experience.
Yes.
thank you to the University of Belize for hosting me, specifically the Faculty of Management and Social Science, a rewarding learning experience. And I cannot leave without saying thank you to the Fulbright Foreign Scholarship Board, because without them, I would not be here talking to you.
All right. Well, we appreciate the work that you have done, and definitely look forward to seeing some of the results once they start rolling out.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to go ahead now and take a break. And when we come back, we'll be talking to representatives of Brothers Habet, and we're going to learn how to paint like a pro.